Okay, hey, so I'm Quentin. I'm the service event manager. This video is going to be going over how to book a service event. So I realize that there are people out there who don't work service events or who have never worked a service event simply because they don't know how to find one, how to book one, how to find a location. And there is so much opportunity with service events, right? You can serve a lot more people in a day, build better relationships with your customers, and they're a massive CPO opportunity as well. So I'm going to go over this. It's super simple. I'm going to go over what it looks like if you're to do it at a hotel, how to negotiate a price, and things like that. So overall, there are just 5 steps. Okay. So step 1 is you need to pick a date for your service event. Step 2 is to find a location. Step 3 is to negotiate a price if necessary. Step 4 is to get the paperwork, and then step 5 is to submit the booking request. Okay. So super simple. So I'll just go through this step by step. Okay, so first, you need to find a date. Now, when you're planning your service events, I highly recommend planning them well in advance. First of all, when you submit a booking request, if you submit it within 2 weeks of the event, you're going to get charged a rush fee, and no one wants to be charged extra fees that are unnecessary. So get those planned out well in advance so that you can submit your booking request well in advance as well. Now, when you are planning what dates that you want your service events to be and where you want them to be, one thing I would suggest is you can plan your service events after your events. Okay, so if you have a local event where you know that you're going to be collecting a bunch of leads at, then plan your service event after that event. Okay, and then you can service all the people from that event right after the event, get more CPO right after the event. You might even service it, a couple weeks later. That's up to you. But if you're going to be in that area for that event, it's never a bad idea to book a service event in that same area so that you can service all those people who walk up to the booth looking for service. Okay, so that's step 1. You just have to have a date in mind. Now, if you're working a super big key event or a tier 1 event that you're going to get tons of leads from, you might book a 2-day service event, right? Or if you have a ton of customers in one area, generally, like if you have even like 50 customers in one area, that can be enough to book a service event there, and the more the better, right? Because the fewer the customers you have, just the more phone calls you're going to need to get it booked up. But if you have more customers there, more is going to get filled up from your marketing. And so that's the first thing. Just pick a day. The second thing is to pick your location. Okay. Now, in terms of picking a location, if you're doing a service event after another event that you're doing, one thing that I would recommend is pick the location very close to that event. Okay, so if you have an event that's at like a convention center, let's say you're working an event at a convention center in Salt Lake City, it's not a bad idea to do a service event also like as close to that convention center as you can. Reason being, if those customers are willing to drive from wherever they're at to that event, they're going to be willing to drive to that event again so that they can get their knife sharpened. Okay, so never a bad idea to find a location close to an event if you're doing it after an event, right? It's also not a bad idea to look for a place that's going to be higher traffic so that you have a higher chance of having people walk in, and you can get more walk-ins at your service event as well. Now, in terms of picking a location, okay, it's pretty typical to do service events at hotels, but keep in mind you don't have to use a hotel for your service event. Okay, you could do a service event at a community center if they offer the chance to rent out rooms or meeting rooms, right? You could do it at like a location that a client has. I've seen people do service events at restaurants, at senior centers, at realtor offices, right? So be creative because, at the end of the day, if you can lower your costs by finding a place that's still well trafficked, is in a good location, and has a lower cost, and you're still going to be able to book it up, right? More power to you. So hotels are great, but, don't feel like you're limited to hotels. So that's step 2, final location. Step 3 is to negotiate a price if necessary, right? Now, if you're doing it at a place like a community center, a lot of times they have fixed rates, and it's just, get that booked, right? But a lot of times at hotels, there is some wiggle room for negotiation. Now, I'm no expert in negotiation, but here is just some things that I've found when it comes to hotels. Different areas are going to have different pricing. So, for example, if I'm looking at hotels that are in like the Naperville area in Illinois, that's going to be a different market in terms of booking those meeting rooms than if I'm looking at like St. George in southern Utah, right? In southern Utah, I might be able to get a hotel for $100, or sometimes maybe even less for a day. Whereas if I'm looking in Naperville, I'm going to be looking at prices that are typically much higher than that. So, in terms of negotiating a price, just a few things to keep in mind. You'll want to remind them, like we are commission based reps, right? So, if they tell you that like the price for the hotel or the price for the room that day is going to be $100 per day, like you always want to see if you can negotiate lower and then just see what they say, right? They might not be able to honor that, but at least you can ask. So if someone says, it's $100 per day for this room, right? I might respond and say like, that is a little over our budget. We are 100% commission based reps. You think there's any way we might be able to do 75, right? And then just see what they say. Now, if I am negotiating in Naperville, I called like 6 different hotels, and most of the hotels in that area were asking for about $400 per day to book one of the meeting rooms. And so knowing this, I said like, well, typically our budget is about like $200. And I explain what we do, and then ask, what can you do for us? Right. And that kind of opens the conversation, and you might be able to at least knock down the price compared to what their typical asking price is. Okay. So I typically, mention like, that we are commission-based reps. It's going to be a very simple setup, right? We're not asking for all this audio visual equipment. We're not asking for all this food to be provided. It's not going to be a crazy setup. Okay. And I also remind them that, if this goes well, we hope to come back and continue to provide more business. And we're going to be bringing all of our clients into your hotel as well. Okay. Now, some places we actually have one hotel in Utah, for example, where we've negotiated with them. We can get them. We actually pay for the service event 100% in Cutco credit. So it's $300 in Cutco credit per day that we work it. And that's been great for us, right? So you might even be able to do negotiation in Cutco credit in there. I have another hotel that we've done where it's $100 per day plus $100 in Cutco credit. And so, you might be able to use Cutco to negotiate for that as well, and then use your 1/3 credit there. Now, when you're explaining what a service event is, typically there's a few common questions that hotels are going to ask you. First, they're going to ask you like how many attendees. Okay. And I typically just explain like, hey, we're actually just going to be scheduling people by appointment for a service event. So we'll have people coming in and out throughout the day. It's typically never going to be more than like 12 to 15 people in the room at a time. Now, if you're doing a service event with multiple other people, it might be a few more people in there, right? So just keep these things in mind when they're asking that. Just keep in mind that they're asking how many attendees you're having so they can know how big of a room that you need, right? They're going to ask typically what is the time of the event. Now, I will usually start out by just asking for the whole day, unless I know like I'm going to be out of there by 5 o'clock, or I might say like 9 to 6, 9 to 7, right? Just give them a times, including the times that you plan to be setting up and taking down for the event as well. Okay. They'll typically ask if you have any additional needs, and, let them know it's very simple. We're not asking for all this audio visual equipment. We don't need any extra food, nothing crazy. And in terms of setup for the event, you might decide that you like an L shape better, but typically what I've seen is people either have their table set up in an L shape or in a U shape. And you can experiment with this yourself. Either way, you want your customer to be surrounded by Cutco while you sharpen their knives as well. Okay, so if I'm doing a service event and it's just me, I typically like to ask for 4 tables in an L shape and then 1 table near the door as like a check-in table, right? So something like that, you might ask for an L shape. And then the fourth thing, or the fourth step, is just to get the paperwork. Now, there's only 2 things that you need from hotels. Okay, the first is a contract. just saying when you're going to be in the room, right? And the times that you're getting. Sometimes they require signature on that, sometimes they don't. And then the second thing is just a credit card authorization form. Now, the benefit of doing service events, again, just like a normal event, you can have Cutco pay for the event for you in advance, and then you just get charged after the event happens on your commission statement. So for that, you do just need to get a credit card authorization form. And then when you fill out your booking request, you just upload those two items, the contract, and the credit card authorization form. And then Petco can get that booked for you. They will pay in advance for you, and then you'll be good to go. The fifth step is to submit a booking request. Now, once you have all this information, I'll just share my screen and walk you through what that looks like if you're using the booking request form on the website. So this is just the form on the website. You're going to use the regular form. Okay, you put your email here, your name here, the division that the event is taking place here, who's submitting payment. The majority of the time, this is going to be Cutco events, right? If you're paying yourself for whatever reason, you'll just put self-book rep. And it would be very, very rare if self-book coordinator would be there. But you put the name of the show. Most of the time you'll just put the city and then service and sales event, right? So if I'm doing an event in St. George, I'll just put St. George service and sales event. Venue location is going to be the place that you've picked. So if that's a community center, if that's a hotel, you just put that there, put the address, the city, the state. It's pretty straightforward stuff. You put the date that it begins and ends. So if it's just a one-day event, it's going to be the same date. You'll put the cost here. Now, if you've negotiated the event to just be, let's say you're bartering Cutco and, like we have our one hotel that just does $300 in Cutco credit per day, I would just put 0 here because that's on me to pay them in Cutco, right? Corner booth, you can put no, electrical no, right? These things don't really apply to service events. Booth size, and you don't really need a booth size either there. Booth number, if you have the name of the meeting room, you can put that there. It's always going to be indoor pretty much for a service event. In terms of the promoter name, this is going to be the contact person. So if you talk to someone from sales at the hotel, and or like the name of the manager or whoever you spoke to at the hotel or community center to get the event booked, the promotional company is typically just going to be the hotel. So like this would be like a La Quinta Inn or a Hampton Inn and Suites. Put the phone number for how you contacted them. And by the way, when you are calling hotels to book service events or to inquire about fees, I typically just use Google. So I'll just go to Google Maps, search for hotels in the area that I want to do an event at, and I'll literally just, the numbers right there on Google Maps, that's the number that I call. And you'll be able to get in touch with someone to get the service event booked. Now, sometimes the person that you need to talk to is not in that day. So again, this is why you want to pick a date well in advance so that you can make these phone calls in advance to be able to get in touch with the person that you need to, right? And I just call, say, hey, I'm inquiring about what a meeting room rate would be for on date X. And then you kind of go from there, right? You put the email of that person as well. Website of the hotel goes here, and then you'll go to the next page. And then on the next page is where you'll have a chance to upload that credit card authorization form and the contract, right? So you just ask the hotel, ask the person that you're speaking to, hey, just need a credit card authorization form and a contract. If you're working at like a small hotel or a hotel in the middle of nowhere, they may not do contracts. But at the very minimum, you do need a credit card authorization form. And I always ask for a contract just to be safe for that booking request, right? After that, you submit the booking request and you're pretty much good to go for getting that booked. The last steps is just to fill it, right? And I use Acuity or Calendly. I use Acuity personally. You can also use Calendly so that you can fill it up. Or you could just use, your own planner, your Google Calendar to book people for that day. You just want to make sure that you're in charge of sending them reminders so that they can come in that day and they know where to go. And then the last thing is just work it and sell it, right? So there's a ton of opportunity for service events. It can be that simple. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I am happy to help.